But right now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shaw.
Thank you everyone. And thanks for coming this afternoon to all these talks about synthetic biology. I've had a really great afternoon. I hope you have too. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the cutting edge of what we can do to build mosquitoes that may be able to stop transmitting diseases. So, mosquitoes. Whose favorite insect? Nobody's, right? So, they are really annoying, and I mean they ruin every picnic that you have. Mosquito bites, they're really itchy, but they can be the beginning of something much worse, because mosquitoes actually spread diseases. And it's not just one disease. There are many diseases that are spread by mosquitoes. And some of these have vaccines, some of them have treatments, but some of them, like dengue fever, and West Nile virus, there are no vaccines and no treatments. So the only way we can control these diseases is really by targeting the mosquito populations to control disease transmission. So we're going to focus a bit briefly on malaria, which is the worst of these diseases, the most deadly disease. And Kevin was telling us earlier on that the mosquito which transmits malaria is the deadliest animal on the planet. In fact, since the beginning of the century, so that's 15 years ago, over 12 million people have been killed by malaria. That's like taking the entire city of Boston, the population of the city of Boston, and wiping them out 20 times. So it's a huge number. And on top of that, 250 million people have had malaria, case of malaria. So that these numbers are really huge. And it's a huge health and economic problem for the countries that are affected by malaria. So that's the situation today, but it used to be that malaria was all over the world, and it didn't matter who you were or how important you were or how powerful you were. You could get malaria and you could die from it, and all of these famous people actually had malaria. So that's the map of the world now, the map of the malaria world. What's the map of the malaria world look like today? Well, on this map, each of the countries is represented by each of the countries, the size of the country is represented the number of malarial deaths. And you can see that Africa is huge, because 90% of the deaths from malaria are occurring in Africa, and mainly in children under 5 years old, because they do not have immunity to the disease. So how do mosquitoes transmit diseases like malaria? Well, the first things first is that diseases are transmitted by female mosquitoes, not male mosquitoes. Females need blood meals that they get to produce eggs. And so if you learn one thing today, that it should be that females are the ones that bite you when you get mosquito bites. So the mosquito bites an infected person, it takes up the parasite into its body, and then after a few days, it goes and bites someone else and transfers that into another person. And so there's this mosquito link between two people that causes disease transmission. How can we interrupt with that mosquito link? We use insecticides. And these malarial mosquitoes, they tend to bite at night. And so we provide mosquito bed nets. And people are protected under mosquito bed nets whilst they sleep from mosquito bites. And also we can spray insecticide on the walls of houses where mosquitoes are resting after blood feeding. But there's a problem, and that is that the insecticides are not enough. And we're encountering more and more cases of insecticide resistance among mosquitoes. And so we really need alternatives in order to control mosquito numbers and prevent disease transmission. So how else can we stop mosquitoes from transmitting diseases? Well, one of the options that we have is to use genetic engineering. So we can modify mosquito DNA and create genetically modified mosquitoes, or GM mosquitoes. And hopefully these will stop the transmission of disease. And what do we mean by genetically modified mosquitoes? Well, if we take the look at the mosquito DNA, it's the blueprint that the mosquito uses to make all of its legs and wings and things like that. And genetic modification is the introduction of genes from another animal, another system, and putting those into the mosquito so that we end up with a genetically modified mosquito. How do we do that? It's quite time-consuming and a very labor-intensive process, but we can inject DNA into the eggs of the mosquito one by one, and then grow these eggs up into genetically modified mosquitoes. This is a mosquito egg here in the middle. It's very small, and that's why this process is quite difficult. But to give you an idea of the size of the mosquito egg, it's a 50th of an inch, so it's like half a millimeter. And this is a dime, so you can see the mosquito egg sitting on the dime. So it's very difficult to inject mosquito eggs, and we have to use a very large microscope with a needle to do that. Okay, so those eggs, we culture them into larvae, and then they grow up into mosquitoes. And all of those mosquitoes are modified with this extra gene, so they are genetically modified mosquitoes. And what can we do with this? Well, one really cool thing we can do is we can make them glow in the dark by expressing fluorescent proteins. And this looks really cool, but it also is very useful to us because it tells us which ones have been modified. So if we can see glow in the dark, we know that those are genetically modified mosquitoes. And we can use it to look at where genes are found in the mosquito, so where they're expressed, where they're turned on and off. So the one on the right here is expressed in virtually all of the mosquito, but the ones on the left are in the midgut, the stomach of the mosquito, and the nervous system. Okay, so how can we use genetically modified mosquitoes to stop disease transmission? Well, here is one way to do it would be to reduce the numbers of mosquitoes. So if there are fewer mosquitoes around, then we'll get less disease transmission. And this is a mating couple. So we have the male on the left-hand side and the female on the right-hand side. And they're caught in the act of mating. But don't be shy, you can look. It's only 20 seconds long, though, so you have to be quick. Okay. And during this mating event, the female receives everything she needs so that she can lay her eggs and for her whole lifetime, in fact. So she will only mate once in her lifetime. And that's really crucial because it's quite amazing that this mosquito species, which you find is very successful, it reproduces very quickly, but it's all dependent on one single mating event. But that's great news for us because if we can interfere with that event, we can prevent the reproduction of the mosquito. And so our proposal is that we would use genetically modified males that are sterile, and we can stop the females reproducing by releasing thousands of genetically modified sterile males. Okay, so this is a